next we have the distinct honor of introducing James Matthew Wilson. Many of you were with us on July 1st, where we read 3 poems from his amazing song cycle, The River of the Immaculate Conception, which is published by Wise Blood Books, and discussed his vision in that poetry, which was commemorates the Mass of the Americas, which the Archbishop commissioned. The vision of America as a Catholic country. And I am right now, by the way, James, reading the history of the man whose last name means cow's head.
Cabeza de Vaca.
Cabeza de Vaca, thank you very much. Which thanks to your mentioning that everybody should read that.
Yes.
So while I was researching St. Benedict for this event and thinking about how to explain what we're doing, Wikipedia just mentioned that there was a poem in his honor written by Mark of Monte Cassino, who was his disciple, who was his fellow monk. And I managed to find an English translation, and James has agreed to read it for us. So James, let me spotlight you.
Yes. Thanks, Maggie. This is going to be a pleasure to do this poem. We don't know who furnished the English translation, though to look at it, you can tell it's from the second half of the 19th century. It's written in long, what are called 14ers, which is just, you all know songs that are ballads. If you take a ballad measure and the first 2 lines of a ballad measure and make it into one long line, you get something that looks like this. And to the sound, to hear it, you might not notice that it's one long line rather than 2 short lines coming together to form a half of a quatrain. Except it does make a difference because it gives the writer a little bit more flexibility in terms of where he places the pauses within his sentences. This poem, it's a fairly complex poem. Certainly not a poem that will make you think Marquis of Cassino was living in a dark age, of Monte Cassino, excuse me, was living in a dark age. It very gently interweaves 4 journeys, 4 pilgrimages, so elegantly that they flow neatly into one another and even interweave with one another. There's first the journey of Benedict from on a hard path, narrow path to Monte Cassino. And in that journey, he brings us and brings the world from the pagan, idolatrous dark ages that the Archbishop was just describing into the Christian world. This journey of Benedict, drawing the world from darkness into light, from paganism into Christianity, is coupled with his own journey from the desert of Hermetic solitude into the Cenobitic tradition, the monastic tradition. And so we go from the desert and the dry land to the fruitful and water-filled harvest lands of the monastery at Monte Cassino. And then this is a poem written by one of his disciples, Marquis of Monte Cassino. And so we also hear of Marcus's journey following Benedict into the monastery. And then it ends with a miraculous depiction of Benedict's funeral procession as his body is carried forth and the whole world is illuminated or magically or miraculously transformed as it follows the progression of his body into the earth and his soul up to God. So hopefully that will help you follow along, because it's a substantial poem. I wouldn't call it a long poem, but it's certainly not a sonnet. So here is Marcus's poem to his master, Saint Benedict. While the blind crowd at idol shrines profane devotions paid, believing that by mortal hands immortal gods were made, this shrine with altars ruinous, with them of old was built, who offered to the impure Jove a sacrifice of guilt. But holy Benedict, By God called from the desert lone, made pure this port, the statues broke, threw down the sculpted stone. A temple for the living God, this idol house is now. Let not the faithful soul delay to pay his pious vow. But hither, haste, spite of rough ways, his recompense shall be that he the heavens opened wide with eyes of faith may see. With hard and toilsome labor, 'tis that great things are attained. Within the narrow path alone the blessed life is gained. While hither coming penitent, bowed down with load of sin, I felt its weight was gone from me. I felt at peace within. And I believe in bliss above. I too shall have my share, if now for Marcus, Benedict will breathe an earnest prayer. The foolish people once had called this place a citadel, and dedicated for their gods of marble there to dwell. But had they wished to find true words with which to stamp the same, Tartarian chaos blank, confused had been its rightful name. Hither they wandered, blinded fools, unceasing vows to pay, to the death-dealing, thundering Jove, acknowledging his sway. The hall's high summit, I suppose, he once had struck in vain, giving the name of citadel to this now sacred fane. Against it now shall not prevail gates of eternal hell. That which the stronghold was of death is now life's citadel. From here is stormed the golden gate of the bright starry heaven, while the blessed crowd sing angel strange to angel voices given. From here, O hermit, thou dost speak to God the thunderer true, on mountain heights leading thy choir, the faithful, chosen, few. From when from a mountain far away to this mount thou didst come, Christ was thy guide by path, while thou the desert drear didst roam. His angels sent to keep my feet at every parting way, lest from the rightful destined path thy faltering steps should stray. He had foretold to thee, just man, alone in desert land, avoid these spots, another friend to guide thee is at hand. Now thou art taken home to him. The mountain's settled dew takes color from the lowering clouds which hide its top from view. The caves drip down with copious tears. The barren grottos mourn. The beasts, their denizens lament. Thou hast left all forlorn. Thee too the lakes and brooks have wept with deep and unfeigned grief. The wood unkempt hath shed for thee each rent and withered leaf. Fables I speak not when I tell that, following thee anear, to bear thee faithful company, 3 ravens did appear. The people seek thee out, where thou hast found by place of rest, where thou await the holy night, eve of the pious feast. Like orphans, destitute, they mourn with hoarse and bitter plaint, bereft of thy sweet fellowship, thou gentle, perfect saint. When thou wert hither brought, behold, the rocks and thorns divide, and wonder-working fountains spring from the earth's parched side. Surely the mount of Christ is Lord of all the mountains round, and yet beneath thy feet it placed its top, twice hollowed ground. For thee, with lowered head, it makes all its rough places plain, that thou, O holy saint of Christ, should herald forth his reign. That they who seek thee, Benedict, should not grow faint and tire. Its gentle slope spreads out for those who upward do aspire. It's right that unto thee the mount itself this honor bring, since with thy healing presence thou dost winter turn to spring. The dust lay out its places dry, with gardens fair to view. Thou cover all its sterile rocks with flowers of every hue. The crags, amazed, bring forth their crops and harvest not their own. The greenwood trees bend down with fruits where once was arid stone. Thus thou, still water hearts of men with healthful streams of prayer, bidding their vain and barren acts the fruit of grace to bear. So now, I pray thee, turn the thorns which rent thy Marcus's breast to fruits unfading of good works, earnest of endless rest.
Wow. Is there any part that spoke more to you, James, than another? Some line that struck you?
There were a few. The one that was most that led me into the poem was this one here. It's right at the turn of the first quarter of the poem. And I believe in bliss above, I too shall have my share. If now for Marcus, Benedict will breathe an earnest prayer. The way in which what that does to the poem is not only does it bring Marcus into the poem as the disciple, but it puts him in colloquy with his master and the subject of the poem, and opens up the sort of life that they're sharing and that's being described here, which otherwise, is brilliantly described. I love the three ravens following Benedict's body to the tomb. It's also marvelous, but at that moment, you sense that this is the voice of one who knew Benedict and is talking to him now, asking for, and that the whole poem is a prayer to Benedict, asking for his own prayers. This is one of only two. Actually, sorry, this is the only contemporary document about the life of Saint Benedict. The next one comes, I think, from a century later. Is it Gregory's? Or is it later? Yeah. So that sort of homely way in which Marcus is speaking to Benedict struck me as it was really my way into the poem.
Yeah, I do. I just think it's amazing that we can hear something so personal and so rich across so many centuries. It kind of puts you in the same room there at Monte Cassino. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You were about to say something.
Oh, just going to say, yeah,